Hello students. Today we're going to talk about inventory costing. In the last chapter we talked about a periodic inventory system and a perpetual inventory system, and we talked about the various journal entries that go with those systems, but we never really talked about how we come up with the cost that we put on the inventory that we sold or the inventory that we still have left on hand. And that's what we're going to do in this chapter. It would be very easy to put a cost on the inventory sold and the inventory that we have on hand if the inventory price, what we pay for the inventory, always remained the same. But that is not the case. The cost of the inventory is constantly changing, usually going up, sometimes going down. So therefore we cannot just assume a certain price for the inventory that we purchased and the inventory that we sold. What we need to do is come up with some type of method to determine the cost of the inventory that was sold and the cost of the inventory that we still have on hand. And we do that using 4 different methods. The first method is the specific identification. Now that method would be when you would specifically identify the item or the invoice for the item that you sold, and you would apply the cost based on that invoice. It's very difficult to do this though if you have a large number of items with a small dollar amount and they're all the same. In fact, it's very impractical to do that. One time that you might use the specific identification would be when you have a small number of items that have a large dollar amount per item, such as in a car dealership. The cars that come in have an invoice for each car. They may have different features even though they are the same model. And therefore it would be practical to identify the specific invoice for each car that was sold. So this specific identification might be used in that type of business. However, in most businesses you do not have a small number of large dollar items. In fact, it's the other way around. You have a large number of small dollar items and they're all the same. So what we're going to do is come up with a method to use to determine the cost of those types of inventory items. We have 3 cost flow assumptions that we use. We have FIFO, which is first in, first out. We have LIFO, which is last in, first out, and we have the average. And depending on whether we have a perpetual or a periodic system, we might use the weighted average or the moving average. The weighted average is used in periodic and the moving average is used in perpetual. Okay? What I've done over here to the side is draw a little illustration of a warehouse where we might bring items in, and as we bring them in we might place them in the very back of the warehouse. So these items back here that were put in first excuse me, may have a lower dollar amount, and as we bring later items in we may increase the dollar amount to where we have down here. We might have a $5 per item, as in the beginning we had a $1 per item. Okay, so now that's how it comes in. This may or may not how we put it in the warehouse. But then as it comes out, how are we going to take that merchandise out? Well, the most logical thing would be to take the ones that you see first, and that would be the ones that are priced at the higher amount. If we actually did that, if we actually took the items out that were placed last, then that would be following the LIFO method, or the last in, first out, because we'd be taking the last items that were put in the warehouse out of the warehouse. If, however, we went all the way down the aisle and picked out the first items that we put in and took those out, then that would be the first in, first out, or the FIFO method. The first ones that came in were the first ones that went out. The point of the matter is, though, it really doesn't matter how you physically put in and take the items out of the warehouse. If all of the items are the same, we're going to use an assumption that they're either taken out on a FIFO basis or taken out on a LIFO basis. And they do not necessarily have to be moved in that way. In other words, the physical flow of the inventory does not have to match the cost flow assumption that we use in our accounting system. We will adopt a system, and whatever system we adopt, we will be consistent with that system for the inventory that we have. Okay? Now, for the FIFO, the first in, first out, we're going to assume that the first items that came in were the first items that came out. And in a period of rising cost, which we normally have, that would mean that the cost of the merchandise would have the lower amount on it, and the inventory that's left would have the higher amount. The opposite is true with LIFO, or last in, first out, because what would be taken out would be the items that are priced at the higher amount in periods of rising cost, and the items that are left would be the lower amount. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. Now, what we do on this last method, the average cost, we basically take an average of all of the items that we have, and we use the average cost of what we have as our cost of merchandise sold, as well as our ending inventory. What I'm going to do on the next video is talk about how we actually come up with those costs. Okay? So that's all for now. Thank you.